Paul Pogba was never designed to disappear into the background. From the moment he stepped onto a football pitch, difference followed him like a shadow. Born in Lagny-sur-Marne, a suburb east of Paris, Pogba grew up in an environment shaped by migration, resilience, and ambition. His parents, originally from Guinea, carried with them a strong sense of discipline and sacrifice. They understood that success would not be handed down, it would have to be earned. Around him, football was everywhere. On concrete courts, narrow streets, and improvised pitches, the ball rolled endlessly. These were not structured spaces. They were expressive spaces. Places where creativity wasn't coached. It was instinctive. Where individuality wasn't restricted. It was survival. This environment shaped Pogba's relationship with football. From an early age, his physical profile stood out. Taller than most. Stronger than most. Yet what truly separated him was not size. It was coordination. He moved with rhythm, balance, and elegance. His touch was soft. His control, effortless. His confidence, natural. Pogba didn't just play the game. He performed it. At Le Havre's academy, coaches quickly realized they were dealing with a rare talent. Pogba could dominate duels, glide past opponents, strike from distance, and deliver defense-splitting passes. He was not confined to a single role. He was everywhere. But with that freedom came complexity. Pogba played with flair, with expression, with joy. He smiled on the pitch, he attempted audacious passes. He trusted his instincts, and while this thrilled some coaches, it unsettled others. Football institutions are built on control. Pogba represented unpredictability. Even as a teenager, this contrast was visible. Manchester United saw what many others feared. They saw potential not just for performance, but for evolution. They saw in Pogba young, believing he could grow into the future of midfield football. Inside the academy, his belief in himself was unmistakable. He didn't feel intimidated by badges or history. He felt ready. But belief alone is not enough. At United, opportunity came slowly. The margins were thin. The competition intense. Pogba trained. He waited. He learned. But matches passed without him becoming central. Trust remained conditional. And for a player whose game depended on freedom and continuity, restriction felt unnatural. This was not a lack of patience. It was a lack of oxygen. Pogba understood something many players ignore until it's too late. Confidence is not permanent. It needs space, it needs responsibility, it needs trust. Without those elements, even the most gifted players can fade. So Pogba made a choice that would define his entire career. He chose to leave certainty in search of belief. Leaving Manchester United at such a young age was risky. Critics questioned his attitude. Media narratives formed quickly. He was labeled arrogant, impatient, difficult. But Pogba wasn't chasing comfort. He was chasing identity. He wanted a place where his difference wouldn't be corrected, where his personality wouldn't be muted, where his football could breathe. When he left England, few understood the significance of that decision, but Pogba did. He knew his career would never follow a straight line. It would be shaped by tension between structure and freedom, discipline and expression, expectation and individuality. And this tension would become the defining theme of his journey. Because Paul Pogba was never meant to fit quietly into football systems. He was meant to challenge them. And the world was about to find out what happens when talent finally finds space. Juventus didn't ask Paul Pogba to change. They asked him to breathe. When Pogba arrived in Turin in 2012, he was still unfinished. Immensely talented, yet unproven at the highest level. To many, he was a gamble. To Juventus, he was opportunity. Italy offered something England never did: patience. In a league defined by tactical discipline and positional intelligence, Pogba found balance. Surrounded by structure, he was given freedom. Surrounded by experience, he was given trust. Andrea Pirlo controlled rhythm. Arturo Vidal provided intensity. Claudio Marchisio offered balance. And within that triangle, Pogba was allowed to express. This was Pogba in his natural state. From his very first season, his influence was undeniable. He glided past opponents with ease. He shielded the ball effortlessly. He struck from distance with both power and precision. He defended, attacked, and transitioned in the same movement. But what truly separated Pogba was not skill, it was confidence. Juventus didn't limit him to instructions. They gave him responsibility. Pogba wasn't asked to be safe. He was encouraged to be bold, to try, to risk, to fail and recover. And Pogba thrived. Between 2012 and 2016, Pogba evolved into one of the most complete midfielders in world football. League titles followed season after season. Domestic dominance became routine. His presence transformed matches. When Juventus needed control, he offered stability. When they needed imagination, he delivered inspiration. Europe took notice. Champions League nights became Pogba's stage. Against elite opponents, he rose. Not with caution, but with authority. His performances were not quiet. They were commanding. He imposed his personality on games, dictating tempo and breaking lines with ease. Off the pitch, Pogba embraced who he was. His hairstyles changed. His celebrations became iconic. His joy became visible. And instead of resisting that identity, Juventus allowed it to exist. This was rare. In Turin, Pogba learned that football doesn't have to strip players of personality to achieve discipline. It can coexist. Expression can live inside structure. By the time his Juventus chapter reached its peak, Pogba was no longer potential. He was certainty. One of the best midfielders in the world. A player who redefined what a modern midfielder could look like. But success brings attention, and attention brings expectation. As Europe's biggest clubs watched closely, Pogba stood at another crossroads. This time, the world was watching. When Paul Pogba returned to Manchester United in 2016, it wasn't just a transfer. It was a statement. A world record fee, global headlines, a narrative already written before he touched the ball. Pogba was no longer a young talent searching for identity. He was supposed to be the answer. The symbol of a club's revival. The face of a new era. Expectation arrived before understanding. Manchester United didn't bring Pogba back to be a piece of the puzzle. They wanted him to be the puzzle itself. Playmaker, leader, physical presence, creative engine. Everything, everywhere, all at once. But Pogba had never been that kind of player. From the start, the environment was unstable. Managers changed. Systems shifted. Roles were redefined week after week. One game, Pogba was asked to control tempo. The next, to defend deep. Then to create higher up the pitch. Clarity never settled. And football without clarity suffocates creativity. Still, moments of Pogba's brilliance cut through the chaos. Long-range goals. Dominant performances. Big game influence. He scored in finals. Delivered decisive passes. Took responsibility when matches demanded personality. But consistency, the word that would follow him everywhere, became elusive. Not because Pogba lacked quality, but because his role never had roots. In England, Pogba's personality was dissected, his confidence misunderstood, his joy questioned, his expression interpreted as distraction rather than fuel. He became a conversation more than a player. Yet when structure appeared, so did Pogba. Under defined systems, his football flourished. When he was given freedom within responsibility, his influence became undeniable. The problem was never ability, it was environment. Then came the contrast. With France, Pogba looked different. At the 2018 World Cup, he delivered maturity and balance. He didn't force moments, he controlled them. He defended when needed, created when allowed, and in the final, he scored. A goal not just of skill, but of presence. World champion. France didn't ask Pogba to carry everything. They asked him to complete the picture. And he did. That tournament revealed the truth many ignored. Pogba thrives in clarity, in balance, in systems that protect creativity rather than demand miracles. Back at United, turbulence returned. Injuries followed, doubt followed, narratives hardened. The space for Pogba to simply play football grew smaller and smaller. By the end of the second United chapter, Pogba wasn't exhausted by football. He was exhausted by expectation. And once again, he stood at a familiar crossroads. Stay and endure, or leave and breathe. For Paul Pogba, the answer had always been the same. Paul Pogba's career will never fit into a simple headline. And that is exactly what makes it important. Football has always tried to categorize players, to define them by roles, numbers, and efficiency. Pogba resisted that from the very beginning. He was never just a defensive midfielder, never only a playmaker, never merely a physical presence. He existed between definitions, and football struggled to decide what to do with that. Pogba represented a different idea of greatness. He showed that a midfielder could be powerful without being rigid, creative without being careless, expressive without being unserious. His game was built on rhythm, confidence, and emotion, elements that don't always translate into spreadsheets or highlight compilations, but shape how football is felt. Criticism followed him throughout his career. Some questioned his consistency, others questioned his mentality, but those critiques often ignored context. Pogba was a player who needed clarity, trust, and balance. When those elements existed, he delivered at the highest level. When they didn't, his football reflected the chaos around him. And that too is part of the truth. With France, Pogba's legacy is undeniable: a World Cup winner, a decisive figure in the biggest tournament football offers. His goal in the 2018 final wasn't just a moment of quality, it was a moment of maturity, proof that Pogba could control emotion, pressure, and expectation when the environment allowed him to be complete. Beyond trophies, Pogba's impact reaches deeper. He inspired a generation to play with personality, to express identity through football. Hairstyles, celebrations, confidence. Pogba normalized individuality in a game that often demands conformity. He made young players believe they didn't have to erase who they were to succeed. Pogba's career also forces football to confront an uncomfortable question. Do we truly understand creative players, or do we only tolerate them when everything goes right? Because Paul Pogba was not a machine. He was human. Brilliant at times, frustrating at others, joyful, emotional, contradictory, and, in that contradiction, deeply real. His career reminds us that football is not only about control and optimization, it's about expression, connection, and identity. Pogba may never be remembered as the most consistent midfielder of his era, but he will be remembered as one of the most influential, not because he fit the system, but because he challenged it. If stories like this resonate with you, stories that explore football beyond tactics and trophies, then Untold Football is your place. Leave a like if you believe football is also emotion, culture, and identity. Subscribe for more untold stories about players who didn't just play the game, they shaped how it feels. Because football's most interesting figures are rarely the easiest to define.